have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Part of the most famous speech from American civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King's remembered each year on the holiday that bears his name. It's the third Monday in January, on or around the time of his birth date of January 15th, 1929. And while Martin Luther King Jr. Day is when federal government employees and many others aren't required to go to their jobs, the event is seen as a day of service, a day on, not a day off, when Americans are encouraged to volunteer in their communities. Dr. King's words and actions, which centered on nonviolent methods of achieving civil rights, continue to reverberate across America almost 56 years after his assassination. Hi, I'm Carl Azus for The World from A to Z. Great to see you as always as we roll into a 4-day production week here in the A to Z studios. Next stop, Iowa, the Hawkeye state, the state that holds the first contest of the U.S. primary and caucus season. In a presidential election, like America will have on November 5th, only one candidate typically appears on the ballot for each major party. But because several people want to be that candidate, the primaries and caucuses help narrow down the field. For Democrats this year, incumbent President Joe Biden's widely expected to be his party's nominee, though 2 other Democrats are running against him. Iowa's Democratic Party is holding a mail-in ballot this year, and the winner will be announced in March. For Republicans, though, it's a different event. There are currently 5 candidates in the race for the GOP nomination, and last night, Iowa's Republican Party held in-person caucuses when people physically gathered in a room and filled out a secret ballot of their preferred candidates. Whoever got the most votes will get the most delegates to support him or her for the official Republican nomination. We don't have results from Iowa yet. Those came in after we produced this show, but former President Donald Trump was widely expected to win. Because results from Iowa can give the top 2 or 3 candidates momentum going into the next primaries and caucuses, political observers from across the country were watching closely to see not only who won, but also who got the second and third most votes, and so on. And one element that might have factored into all this: the weather. A major winter snap has brought sub-freezing temperatures, snow, and ice to hundreds of millions of Americans, and in Iowa at caucus time last night, the temperature was hovering at around 5 degrees below zero.
World of knowledge. Which of these nations borders the Red Sea? Yemen, Oman, Somalia, United Arab Emirates. The only one of these countries that borders the Red Sea is the Middle Eastern nation of Yemen.
For weeks, a rebel group in Yemen has been attacking ships in the Red Sea. Houthi rebels have said they'll target any vessels that they think are headed to Israeli ports. They're doing this to oppose Israel in its continued war against the Hamas militant group in Gaza. But because the Red Sea is an important international shipping route, the U.S. and its allies have been trying to protect ships there, and they've been striking back against Houthi rebels in Yemen. The back-and-forth violence is threatening to lead to a bigger international conflict in the Middle East.
Officials say the U.S. and U.K. struck more than 60 Houthi targets in Yemen overnight. That's in response to the Iran-backed group's attacks on commercial shipping vessels along the Red Sea trade route. Those threaten to drive up the cost of oil, gas, and other goods globally.
The kinds of attacks that they've been conducting since November 19th will not be tolerated.
But the risk of the U.S.'s retaliation is embroiling it in a regional conflict near the existing war in Gaza. To negate that,
these strikes were intended to be very surgical.
President Joe Biden says he ordered the attack with backing from the Netherlands, Canada, Bahrain, and Australia. Some congressional leaders are expressing bipartisan support for the strikes, although it's unclear what lawmakers knew in advance.
We haven't been briefed on the specifics of these strikes, but I expect that we will be in the days ahead.
Meanwhile, a senior Biden administration official says more action could follow. Two former NATO Supreme Allied commanders for Europe say that could involve Iran or the Houthis once again.
They either stop or we will have to escalate what we're doing.
I'm Amy Kiley reporting.
On this date in world history, Rome might not have been built in a day, but the Roman Empire was established on this day back in the year 27 BC, when its Senate convened and declared that Caesar Augustus would be Rome's first emperor. The empire would dominate a large region of the world for hundreds of years. And on this date in 1919, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified. It would take effect the following year and prohibit the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors, and that applied throughout the United States. This became known as Prohibition, and it remained in effect until December of 1933, when the 21st Amendment was ratified and repealed the 18th. Behold, Lingulodinium polyhedra. Of course, it's a type of algae present during algae blooms in California, and despite being known as red tides, these blooms give off beautiful blue hues when waves crash at night. The surreal scene recently washed ashore on the coast of the Golden State. It typically happens there a couple times a year. The cerulean glow appears thanks to a phenomenon called bioluminescence.
Our oceans are fantastical places, filled with bizarre creatures, many of which can glow. Scientists estimate that 90% of deep-sea creatures are bioluminescent. That bioluminescence is considered a cold light, and not just because it's often a cool blue color. Light can be described as two types. Incandescent is the most common, generated by hot temperatures. The sun or old-school light bulbs, for example. Luminescent is light created without heat. Bioluminescence is actually an example of chemiluminescence, a chemical reaction. Inside the plastic is a small, thin glass tube. Once this was broken, the chemicals inside the tube mixed, and light was produced. The bioluminescent phenomenon we see in ocean creatures is similar. Species that glow have luciferin, a molecule that, when it reacts with oxygen, produces light. Some also produce the catalyst luciferase, which helps to speed up the reaction. We don't know all the functions of bioluminescence in creatures, but some, like the deep-sea prawn, use it for self-defense. Others, like the hatchetfish or the Japanese firefly squid, use it for camouflage. For others, it's a means of communication. The deep-sea anglerfish uses it to eat. Dangling a bioluminescent barbel lit by glowing bacteria, it lures prey to its mouth. A few organisms on land glow too. Fireflies are a no-brainer, but also worms and some types of mushrooms.
We hope the Rams are keeping warm in Wyoming. Not just the animals, we're talking about Mrs. Bainter's students at Bighorn Middle School. Shout out to the community of Bighorn in the Cowboy State. And over in the Tar Heel State of North Carolina, we see Mr. C's class at Cross Creek Early College High School. Thank you for watching from Fayetteville.
Watch a California homeowner's close encounter with a bear found squatting literally and figuratively under her home. It started when Tina Herzog's security camera spotted the large bear milling around her Monrovia property at night. The next morning, the big burly bear had cozied up in her crawl space, and no matter what she tried, the stubborn thing just wouldn't budge. She even gave it a stern talking to.
Out, out, and out. Bad bear.
How'd the animal fit in such a small space as a crawl space? Just barely. And a homeowner is not the same thing as a den mother, so that cub needs to scout out some bear else to hibernate, because that's an Ursa Major burden to bear, with the landlord and the law bearing down on you to bear right out of there. Plus, it's gotta be embarrassing. I'm Carl Azus, and we hope you'll bear with us again tomorrow for the world from A to Z. You mean the world to us.